Coming up.
The government has ordered the closure of the offices of TikTok in Canada. So who are you going to investigate in the future if there's an issue raised with respect to TikTok? If they have no presence in Canada, if they terminate, as has been the order of the government, for very opaque reasons.
We have the government saying, we're shutting the office down. We have national security concerns. These concerns are so serious, we can't inform the public. It sounds like the government isn't that interested in sharing anything with your office. But at the same time, it's so serious that Canadians can continue to use TikTok. I would submit that it doesn't add up.
Wouldn't it make sense to go to the government and determine what and the reason why to further inform your decisions in order to determine whether further investigation is required? It's almost as though you're operating in a vacuum that has maybe 70% of the information.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Mr. Dufresne, what are the potential risks with the privacy and data of Canadians who continue to use TikTok?
Well, we are investigating the consent practices, transparency of TikTok. The investigation is underway, so I can't speak about the substance of that investigation, but when we announced it, we did indicate that it would have a specific focus on children's privacy and younger users. So we are working hard with our colleagues from Quebec, British Columbia, and Alberta to complete this as soon as possible, and I hope to do so, as I said, in the next few months.
So we're in a very, I think that there's a bit of a problem for Canadians who are trying to make an informed decision for themselves, parents who are trying to parent their children, for children who are trying to make informed decisions for themselves. We have a government who has said, this app is okay for you to continue to use. However, the offices of this business that operate this platform must be closed. And there are specific risks, but we can't tell you what they are. So it's a complete absence of transparency. Now, you're an independent officer of Parliament, and so you serve a function that's important to help keep Canadians informed, to help be a check against some of what government does. Should the government have been more transparent with Canadians on a matter that deals with the protection of Canadians' privacy? And should the government have aligned their decision and announcements with the release of your report?
Well, the government's decision announced on November 6th by the Minister of Innovation indicates that this is made under the Investment Canada Act. It's made on national security reasons. So our investigation is a different track. Our investigation is looking at the privacy of Canadians, in particular children. So we're moving that forward, but the national security component is a separate aspect. So I can't speak to that decision and to the reasons behind it. I wasn't part of it. I wasn't consulted on it. What I can say is that we have issued, myself and my colleagues from the provinces and territory, a statement on the privacy of children. And we make a number of points in there in terms of setting out our expectations for organizations, giving tips, highlighting certain things for parents and children, making sure that the privacy protections are highest, calling out organizations when their practices aren't clear enough. So we're going to continue to use the tools that we have, which is the promotion and the investigation power, and look forward to completing that.
So I'm interested in your investigatory powers. Now, the government has ordered the closure of the offices of TikTok in Canada. So who are you going to investigate in the future if there's an issue raised with respect to TikTok? If they have no presence in Canada, if they terminate, as has been the order of the government, for very opaque reasons, and we have no metric, we have no measure to be able to judge whether those are good reasons or not, but they've ordered the closure of these offices. Who would you investigate? who would you ask for documents from? Foreign entities? And would those foreign entities have any obligation whatsoever to participate or cooperate with your investigations?
So Canadian law will apply to a matter if it impacts Canadian users. So it's not necessary for privacy law in Canada to apply for an organization to have offices in Canada or for it to have generated in Canada. So the courts have recognized if there's a real and substantial connection to Canada, and that could be having Canadian users, having Canadians impacted by this, then we have jurisdiction. And so how we investigate those things, if the organization doesn't have anyone in Canada, then we would reach out to the organization in other countries.
So you reach out to them in another country, and they say, contact our Canadian office. What do you do?
Well, we reach out with the organization in the other country. If it doesn't have a Canadian office, then we would speak to them outside Canada.
I understand that, sir. But with all due respect, what jurisdiction does an officer of the Parliament of Canada have in China?
Well, we don't have any enforcement powers in other countries. We don't have the ability to force an organization to collaborate with us or to provide us with information if they're outside of Canada. So
it seems a bit problematic then, you might see what I'm driving at here, for us to have no entity in this country for you to collaborate with, as you said. Like that creates a problem, no?
Well, certainly in terms of compelling powers.
Right.
If there's a refusal to provide us with documentation, it's easier if the organization is in Canada.
Yeah, I expect it would be easier. And so it just seems odd that the government would say, this is so dangerous that we have to close the office, but it's okay for children to continue to use the app. So I guess what I'm driving at here is they need to pick a lane. Either it's okay, it's safe for Canadians, or it's not, and we just don't know. Isn't that a problem?
Well, I'm focused on the investigation that we're pursuing. So we're interacting on this with Tik Tok. We're asking the questions. We're going to be publishing our report, as I say, as soon as we can. And that will contain our conclusions in terms of compliance with Canadian privacy law.
The government's decision with respect to the Investment Canada Act review, how does that relate to TikTok's, sorry, I'm going to rephrase this. From your understanding, the government's decision under the Investment Canada Act review relates entirely to TikTok business operations, not the app itself. Is that correct?
Well, as the decision is announced, it is not closing the app. It is calling for the wind-up of the Canadian operations of TikTok.
Can you expand on that a little bit? What does that mean?
Well, I haven't seen any order from the government banning the app in Canada or preventing its use. It's calling on the organization to cease its corporate activities in Canada.
Have TikTok representatives, either through the Canadian subsidiary or the head office, cooperated with your investigation?
We have been working with them. We have been obtaining the information. I don't want to comment beyond that because the investigation is not concluded.
Does your investigation involve ByteDance?
We've made a statement on our investigation, what it covers. It is looking at the privacy practices of TikTok. I can refer back to our statement.
No. Sir, I really need to get these questions in, and you're just kind of drifting on some of these answers. So let's focus in. Is the investigation nearing completion?
Yes.
When will the report be issued?
I hesitate to give a specific date. This is a joint investigation, but we are pushing to moving along as fast as possible.
Has the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, has their announcement ordering the windup of TikTok in any way impacted your ability to investigate?
I wouldn't be able to say yes to that. No, I think we're moving along with our investigation at this stage, and we'll be concluding it as soon as we can.
Okay. Do you feel like you have the power within the mandate of your office to adequately access the information needed to have a full and complete report?
We are moving along, and I'm not calling for more powers in terms of enforcement during the investigation. I'm calling for more powers at the end of the investigation.
And what would that look like?
So I'm calling for order-making powers. If I find a breach of the law, to be ordering an organization to comply with my findings. I'm not calling for powers of investigation. We have those powers already in the law.
So then why call for it after if you're claiming you already have them within the law?
We have sufficient powers in the law to do our investigations. But once the investigation is completed, if I find that the law was not complied with, I don't have the authority to order the organization, for instance, to stop doing something, to change its privacy practices.
I understand.
That's the challenge.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. That concludes our first round. We're going to start our 5-minute round now with Mr. Caputo. And before you begin, Mr. Cooper, I was going to congratulate you on your bold choice of a tie today, Mr. Cooper.
You're right.
I like it.
Bold is a different.
Mr. Cooper, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, you had indicated that your office learned about the government's decision to order the closing of Tik Tok's Canadian subsidiary, Tik Tok Technology Canada, at the same time that the public found out about that, correct?
That's correct.
And has the government provided your office with any further information since that time?
Not that I'm aware. I perhaps at the staff level, but I could confirm that. I don't think so.
Okay, thank you for that. And we have a rather interesting situation insofar as the government has proceeded to shut down Tik Tok's subsidiary. They have withheld from Canadians the rationale for doing so, citing national security risks that they claim are so severe that they can't be shared with the public and evidently can't be shared with your office. Has your office attempted to acquire further information as to the rationale for this that might be pertinent and informative to your investigation?
Not at this stage. We're focused on concluding our investigation.
But do you not see that there might be information that could potentially be relevant?
At this stage, we're content with the process of our investigation.
Well, yeah, okay, thank you for that. But going back to my point, we have the government saying, we're shutting the office down. We have national security concerns. These concerns are so serious, we can't inform the public. It sounds like the government isn't that interested in sharing anything with your office. But at the same time, it's so serious that Canadians can continue to use Tik Tok. I would submit that it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And I guess when you look at the concerns that the government has that have been identified, I would submit there are legitimate concerns about the fact that Tik Tok, being owned by ByteDance, a Chinese company, could theoretically be required to turn over data and other personal information of Canadians to the Beijing-based regime. In that regard, I would note that Article 77 of the cybersecurity law ensures that data is collected and stored in China, and that when it is ordered by Beijing's Ministry of Public Security, it must be handed over, period. And so that theoretical concern is there. Do you have any evidence that it in fact is happening? Because Tik Tok came before this committee and was absolutely adamant that such information has not been shared with the Beijing regime.
Well, I think, again, this is an area where I can't venture because we are currently investigating. So if it comes up, this would be something we would indicate in our final report.
Thank you for that. Shutting down the subsidiary of TikTok doesn't change the fact that Canadians are as vulnerable to such information being shared with Beijing-based regime, does it?
Well, the app continues to be available,
right,
and
so,
Canadians can continue to use it.
So Canadians face the same risk.
Well, that's courts have found that Canadian law will still apply if Canadians are using it, even if you don't have a.
Yes, but as you noted, Canadian law still applies where there is a reasonable and substantial connection. But as you also said, your enforcement powers or the ability of Canadian courts to enforce matters and decisions don't exist for all intents and purposes in the country of China, controlled by the Beijing-based communist regime. So, again, my point with that preamble is simply this hasn't changed a thing from the standpoint of protecting the privacy of Canadians, but what it has done is muddied the waters in a considerable way. The government has been completely lacking in transparency, and it's completely unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Realistically, what can you do for a Canadian company with a Canadian subsidiary and a foreign company without one?
I think the big difference is if we need to compel, if there's a lack of collaboration, and then we need a court order to order the disclosure of something. So that can be easier if the entity is in Canada than if it's not. So that's where this would come up. Under the law, I have powers to order a company to give me documents or to provide access with some of its information. So we can exercise those if a company is in Canada. If a company is not in Canada, then that can raise different questions.
But you could do that through international cooperation, through MOUs. You could do that through the courts. Like we've already seen successful court cases, right?
Right. So if something is in another jurisdiction and you need enforcement, then you seek that from the courts of that jurisdiction.
So realistically speaking, then, if TikTok were to close up shop in Canada, still do something negatively to impact Canadians' privacy, you do have the ability to enforce PIPEDA, but you need to do it through an MOU or through the courts.
Right. If PIPEDA applies to something because there's a real and substantive connection to Canada, then we can get an order from courts. The question becomes making that order recognized in another jurisdiction. And as you say, this could be done by MOU or by international recognition.
Okay.
Looking at the other comparators, have you in your time, Mr. Dufresne, been investigating the other platforms, X, Instagram, Twitter, and the like? Have you had a chance to review the privacy concerns around those companies as well?
So we've been focusing. We have a complaint with Meta Facebook. We have this one, and we had the announcement of our decision on ALO MindGeek. So those were the big ones that were concluded and made public.
And in your estimation, do you see commonalities in terms of the themes and the way in which privacy breaches are prevalent in what is otherwise a form of kind of surveillance capitalism?
Well, one of the things that we've seen, and we've seen it this summer, we have done with international partners and with partners in Canada what we call a privacy sweep. And in this year, we did this not only with privacy authorities, but with competition authorities. And we looked at what we call deceptive design practices, which are practices where an organization is going to use tools to manipulate users into making choices that are not in their interest. And
is that report? And so in that report, did you find some of these platforms to be more egregious in their use than others?
Well, what we found, sadly, is that the 97% of the organizations and sites that we looked at, and we looked at a lot of them, they had at least one of those bad practices in terms of having language that's not clear.
Just getting back to comparators, I want to focus on that for a moment. Obviously, we have lots of platforms, all of them providing business models in very similar ways in terms of how they advertise, profile, understand the end user. And yet TikTok was singled out and banned from this country without, I would argue, without a real full public disclosure. In your estimation, do you believe that it's important for the public to fully understand the impacts on their privacy by the use of these platforms? And I would add, do you think that given the fact that TikTok has been banned, that the government has a duty to report back to the public as to why?
Well, I think transparency is important. I think the more the public can understand about the decisions of the government, the decisions of my office, the better. There may be some limits in terms of confidentiality, but certainly this is important. We initiated this complaint, this investigation vis-a-vis TikTok, in particular because of the high number of younger users on the platform, and so that is a strategic priority that we have, and so we're moving forward on that and hoping that our conclusions on that will be beneficial to others who may have similar practices.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Caputo, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses again for being here. It feels like it's a bit of a regular occurrence as a relative newcomer to this committee. Now, I just want to pick up where Mr. Green left off. Something I found interesting, Commissioner, is what you said, that younger users are targeted. But it seems to me that social media generally targets young users, period. I think we can agree on that, right?
Well, there's targets all users, but I don't think I said it targeted younger users. There's a high number of younger users. So,
right. Those are my words. Higher number. Now, when it comes though, you've got several issues with privacy. You've got issues with privacy that are contemporaneous with use, and then you've got issues with privacy that exist regardless of whether someone uses, as in tombstone information, that type of thing. Do you get what I mean by that? Yeah. So obviously, younger users become older users. So would the concerns not be the same across social media platforms that would apply, because even despite the fact that TikTok is targeting younger users?
Well, we've made the protection of children's privacy one of our priorities, and that's something that's shared internationally. So we did it recently with the G7 counterparts. We issued a statement saying, build AI with the best interest of the child at heart. So ask yourself, there will be some different considerations. We call upon stronger privacy protections for younger users, stronger rights, for instance, to deletion of information that might have been posted as a child. And that's what I meant when I said children have the right to be children. If you hold them to the same level of accountability as adults because you're leaving things forever, that's a challenge. So we're looking at that. We're looking at making sure that lens of children's best interest is always there, and that those privacy protections are stronger by default.
To the best of your knowledge, where is the data for TikTok stored?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the end of your question.
To the best of your knowledge, where is the data for TikTok stored?
This is getting into sort of factual questions that we're investigating that, so I can't be speaking on those things at this time.
Okay. I mean, it seems to me that would be part of the transparency that I hope we would see. I didn't think that was a question in dispute, but obviously it may well be. So I'll pivot to this issue of transparency. Now, my colleague, Mr. Cooper, spoke about the failings of the government, and as I understand it, there are two parallel issues. You've got the government winding up the TikTok, I won't say brand, but whatever business entity in Canada, and then you've got a related issue with your investigation. And as I understand from what you said to Mr. Cooper, you are not privy to the government of Canada's, rationale for winding up TikTok. Is that correct?
not beyond the public statement.
Okay. And you said, if I understood you correctly earlier, that you would be completing your investigation, notwithstanding whatever the Government of Canada has decided. Is that right?
Yes, we're moving forward with our investigation, and again, whatever information we may need or obtain in the meantime, we would do that, and we would finalize the investigation, and then those findings are going to be made public and the full rationale at that time.
Okay. Wouldn't it make sense to, at the conclusion of your investigation, which you've done independent of the government's, their rationale, wouldn't it make sense to go to the government and determine what and the reason why to further inform your decisions and in order to determine whether further investigation is required? It's almost as though you're operating in a vacuum that has maybe 70% of the information.
Right. Well, I think, again, this would be part of the decisions that we make in the context of that investigation. If we decide, well, we're going to reach out to X to obtain this information and to inform our findings, that may occur, and then we would make that public at the end of the investigation once it's concluded.
So you may actually reach out to the government to determine its rationale?
Well, what I'm saying is I'm not confirming the investigative steps that we've taken in the past or that we would take in the future. The investigation is ongoing, and we want to conclude it as soon as possible and have those findings for Canadians.
No, I understand that, sir. I'm just trying to probe, I guess, the depths of the investigation, especially as it relates to national security. It would seem that would be a necessary step. I'm not trying to challenge or suggest your investigation won't be fulsome. What I'm saying is that it seems to me that the national security element and the privacy element really would at least potentially go hand in hand. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Go ahead.
Very limited in terms of what I can say about the conduct of the investigation as it's underway.
Understood.